Welcome back to TalesBlip, and today's story is The Boy with the Orange Hair. Hi, I'm Max, and I'm 35. I'm a painter, but I'm also a storyteller, and I've got a story for you today. A story that happened in our small town, a story I've never told before, until now. This is a story about a boy named Lucas Murphy, a boy who was different, a boy who scared us all. But he was also a boy who showed us something we didn't want to see, something we couldn't explain. It all started with a house by the cemetery. The house stood on the edge of town, a dilapidated Victorian with peeling paint and overgrown ivy that clung to its rotting wooden frame like a shroud. It was a stark contrast to the tidy, brightly colored homes that lined the rest of our street. I remember when the bus would pass that house on our way to school, I'd always feel a prickle of unease. It wasn't just the ramshackle state of the house, but the way it seemed to sit in the shadow of the cemetery behind it. Every time I looked at that house, I felt like I was peering into another world, a world that was both unsettling and intriguing. I was about 9 years old, in 3rd grade, when Lucas Murphy moved to town and became the new occupant of that house. He arrived with his aunt and grandmother, 2 women who seemed as out of place as the house itself. His aunt, Agnes, was tall and thin with a pale, almost translucent complexion and dark circles under her eyes that made her look perpetually exhausted. She always wore a long, flowing black dress that made her seem like a figure from a Gothic novel. His grandmother, Esther, was a smaller, more vibrant figure, with a sharp, almost feral look in her eyes. Despite her age, she had an energy about her that could be both comforting and intimidating. From the first day he arrived at school, Lucas was different. He was like a creature from a different species, dropped into our little world, completely out of place. He had a shock of fiery orange hair that stood out against his almost albino skin, and his gangly limbs seemed to stretch out endlessly like a spider's legs. He was quiet, always on the edge of things, his eyes darting around the room as if he was expecting to be attacked. The whispers started almost immediately. They started with his hair. Carrot Top, some called him, or Ginger Snaps. It was harmless enough at first, just a silly name to try to make him feel less different. But as he got older, those whispers grew more malicious, more barbed. His physical appearance wasn't the only thing that set him apart. Lucas's behavior was unsettling, unnerving. He never seemed to be able to blend in. He was always a few steps behind the rest of us, as if he was observing us from a distance, gauging our reactions, studying our every move. He rarely spoke, preferring to observe, to listen. And when he did speak, it was often to tell stories that chilled the bones of anyone who listened. He'd tell us tales about his family, stories about the old house, about his great-grandmother who, he claimed, had been a witch. He'd talk about how she'd escaped Salem just before the trials, how she'd been chased by demons, how she'd lived a life of magic and secrets. We'd listen, mesmerized, our eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. It wasn't long before the whispers about Lucas started to turn into rumors. They spread like wildfire, carried on the breeze that swept through the halls of our small town, whispered behind cupped hands in the school cafeteria, exchanged in hushed tones at the bus stop. They spoke of his family, of his house, of his stories. They said he was the descendant of witches, that he was cursed, that he was somehow different. By the 4th grade, Lucas had started to grow a beard. It was a thin, wispy beard at first, but it grew thicker and fuller with each passing year. By the time he reached junior high, it was a full, Amish-style beard, framing his face and making him look even more out of place. He was nicknamed Goat Boy by some, and the whispers about him grew even louder, more insistent. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke. He'd often talk about his great-grandmother in the present tense, as if she was still alive, still a part of their lives. He'd talk about her powers, about how she taught him things, about how he could sense her presence, even when she was gone. It was in the 5th grade that Lucas told Mrs. Adams, our teacher, about his great-grandmother escaping Salem just before the infamous witch trials. Mrs. Adams, a kind and gentle woman, tried to explain that the trials had occurred in the late 17th century, but Lucas only leaned back in his chair, grinned coyly, and said, "My great-grandma is pretty old." It was a chilling moment, a moment that made me question what I knew about the world. Despite his strange stories and his unsettling demeanor, Lucas was never the target of any serious bullying. It wasn't like he was completely ostracized. But there was a palpable fear that hung in the air around him, a fear that was difficult to explain. There was a sense of unease, a sense that something was wrong, something was off, there was only one occasion when I remember someone physically confronting Lucas. It happened during his freshman year of high school, in the hallway between classes. Trent Noren, a senior who was twice Lucas's size and a notorious bully, shoved him from behind, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Trent's booming laugh echoed through the hallway as he shouted, "Freak!" The whole school seemed to stop and stare, anticipating a fight, a moment of drama. But Lucas simply got up, dusted himself off, gathered his books, and continued on his way. He didn't look back, didn't show any anger or fear. His face was impassive, his eyes cold. After that day, the whispers about Lucas grew even louder, even more insistent. They spoke of his strange stories, his unnerving demeanor, his connection to the witches of Salem. They said that his strange behavior had somehow caused Trent's accident. The night of the accident, Trent had been driving with his girlfriend, Sarah, a beautiful, popular senior. They were on their way to a party when their car spun out of control, smashed into a telephone pole, and burst into flames. Trent was paralyzed from the waist down. Sarah didn't survive. The official explanation was hydroplaning, but many people whispered that Lucas had cursed Trent, that he had somehow caused the accident. They said Lucas was a witch, that he had supernatural powers, that he could bring misfortune upon anyone who crossed him. Throughout junior high and his freshman year of high school, Lucas was never seen at a school dance, or any other school event for that matter. He seemed to exist in a separate reality, a world that was both fascinating and terrifying to us. Then, in September of 1994, just before our homecoming dance, Lucas approached me. It was unexpected, a moment that seemed to break the pattern of our lives. He was tall, even taller than me now, but still thin and gangly, with his beard looking fuller than ever. He looked at me with those same unsettling, piercing blue eyes, and said, "Max, I'm going to the homecoming dance this year. Do you think I should wear a tuxedo?" I was taken aback. Lucas never talked to anyone. The fact that he was even considering going to the dance was shocking enough. But why me? Why would he choose me, someone who was far from popular, someone who wasn't even a close friend? I told him that most people wouldn't wear a tuxedo, that a nice shirt and pants would be fine. Then, in a moment of foolish curiosity, I asked, "Are you going with anyone?" He grinned, that unsettling, almost predatory grin, and said, "Rachel Bennett." I could only stare at him in disbelief. Rachel Bennett was the most popular girl in school. She was beautiful, charming, and the apple of Trent Noren's eye before his accident. She was a queen bee, and she'd never been seen with anyone, even a senior, who wasn't on the top of the social hierarchy. "I've already asked her," Lucas said, his voice as smooth as velvet, and she said yes. I didn't say anything. I just walked away from him, shaking my head, trying to make sense of what I just heard. The next day, I couldn't help but tell my friend, Jason, about my encounter with Lucas. "He's going to the homecoming dance with Rachel Bennett," I said, my voice still echoing with disbelief. Jason just laughed. "You know, Max, sometimes Lucas just tells stories. He likes to see people's reactions." But I knew, deep down, that something was wrong. Lucas wasn't making it up. He was serious. And the thought of him, with Rachel, at the dance, filled me with a sense of dread, a sense of fear that I couldn't shake. Word of Lucas's declaration spread through the school like a virus. Whispers turned into snickers, then into shouts. "He's a freak," they said. "He's a pervert. He's going to ruin the dance." The day of the dance, the air hung heavy with anticipation, with fear, with a sense that something was about to change. We all knew that the dance was going to be different. That it was going to be special. But we didn't know how. We were all there that night, almost everyone, despite the storm that raged outside. The music pounded, the lights flashed, and we danced and talked and tried to pretend that everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. The night was like a dream, a twisted nightmare, where everything was familiar, but somehow wrong. We saw Lucas and Rachel walk into the gymnasium, both of them glowing, both of them radiating an aura of something strange, something otherworldly. They stood out, a beacon in a sea of normalcy. The music stopped, the room went silent. Then the screams started. It wasn't just the students who screamed. The teachers screamed too, the chaperones, the principal, everyone. Their eyes widened in horror, their mouths dropped open in disbelief. I saw it all, but I didn't understand. I saw Rachel, wearing the same dress she'd been buried in, her face pale, her eyes hollow, her hair limp and lifeless. I saw Lucas, his beard overgrown, his eyes burning with an unsettling fire, his face a mask of strange, unnatural pleasure. The world I knew shattered that night, and I couldn't bring myself to look away from the scene unfolding before my eyes. Rachel, her head resting on Lucas's shoulder, swayed to the rhythm of the screams, her body moving in an uncanny, almost unnatural way. I saw it all, and I couldn't help but think back to those stories Lucas used to tell. The stories about his great-grandmother, the stories about magic, the stories about the supernatural. Maybe those stories weren't stories at all. Maybe they were a warning. Maybe they were a truth that we were just beginning to understand. The night of the homecoming dance was a night that would forever be etched in the memories of everyone who witnessed it. The air, thick with a mix of excitement and fear, was suddenly choked by a palpable sense of horror. The music stopped, the dance floor emptied, and a silence, heavy and unnerving, descended upon the room. My eyes, along with those of every other student in the gym, were fixated on the unlikely couple standing on the dance floor. Lucas, his beard long and unkempt, his eyes ablaze with an unsettling light, held Rachel by the hand. Rachel, her face deathly pale, her eyes vacant and hollow, wore the same dress she had been buried in. It was a dress that had been the subject of hushed whispers and morbid speculation, a dress that had haunted our dreams in the weeks following her tragic death. It was a dress that was supposed to be in a grave, not on a dance floor. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional gasp or stifled scream. Then, slowly, the music started again. It wasn't the same song, but it was a familiar tune, a popular song from the year before, a song that everyone knew. The tempo was slow, mournful, and as the music swelled, Rachel, her body as stiff as a doll, began to move. She swayed back and forth, her head resting on Lucas's shoulder, her eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. She moved like a puppet, her body completely under the control of someone, or something else. The screams started again, louder this time, more frantic. People were backing away from Lucas and Rachel, their faces twisted with fear, their bodies trembling. But Lucas didn't seem to notice. He held Rachel close, his gaze fixed on her, his face a mask of unsettling serenity. As the music continued, I noticed that Lucas was humming along to the melody, his voice a low, guttural whisper that sent chills down my spine. He was whispering words that I couldn't understand, words that sounded like a language from another world, a language that was both ancient and terrifying. Then, as the music reached its climax, Rachel's body jerked, and she raised her head, her eyes flickering with a light that was both unsettling and terrifying. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on each person in turn, and then she started to sing. It was a song that I'd never heard before, a song that was both hauntingly beautiful and chillingly unnerving. It was a song that seemed to come from a place beyond our understanding, a song that spoke of a world that was both ancient and dark. I felt the world around me shift. The walls seemed to close in, the air grew thick and heavy, and a sense of dread washed over me. It was as if we were no longer in the familiar world of our small town, but in a place where the rules of reality were suspended, a place where anything was possible. Rachel's song became a siren's call that drew us all closer to her, closer to the darkness that surrounded her, closer to the unknown. I felt myself being pulled towards her, as if by an invisible force, as if I was being drawn into a vortex of chaos and despair. I looked around the gym, and I saw the same thing happening to everyone else. The students, the teachers, the chaperones, everyone was being pulled towards Lucas and Rachel, towards the darkness that emanated from them. I tried to resist, to fight against the unseen force that was pulling me closer, but it was like trying to fight against a tidal wave. I felt myself being drawn closer and closer to the dance floor, to Lucas and Rachel, to the darkness that was growing stronger with every passing moment. I felt my feet moving against my will, my body pulled towards the epicenter of the strange energy that pulsed from the dance floor. Each step was a struggle, my mind screaming at me to stop, to run away, to escape the growing darkness. But I couldn't move, my body completely under its sway. As I got closer, I could see Lucas's face more clearly. His eyes were glowing, a deep, unnatural blue that seemed to pierce the darkness. He looked at me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He knew. He knew I was coming. I saw Rachel, her lifeless eyes fixed on me, a chilling smile on her lips. She sang, her voice echoing with an otherworldly sound, a sound that resonated deep in my bones. Her song was a melody of despair, a siren's call that echoed through my thoughts, twisting my memories, warping my sense of reality. Suddenly, the music stopped, and the world went silent. The room, once filled with dancing students, stood motionless, a tableau of frozen terror. Rachel's song had stopped, and she leaned her head back onto Lucas's shoulder, her eyes once again vacant and lifeless. Lucas, his eyes still locked on mine, slowly raised his hand and pointed a finger towards me. His voice, low and guttural, echoed through the room, a voice that seemed to come from a place that was both ancient and terrifying. "You see," he whispered, "I told you." She said yes. He gave a low chuckle, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was a sound that held both amusement and a chilling cruelty. Then, he took Rachel's hand and turned to leave, walking away from the dance floor, away from the screaming students, away from the frozen tableau of horror that surrounded him. I stood there, frozen in place, as Lucas and Rachel disappeared through the gymnasium doors. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, my body still under their control. The world around me was silent, the only sound the echo of my own pounding heart. I was lost. I was alone. And I had no idea what was going to happen next. More_vert The silence in the gymnasium was suffocating, thick with a palpable sense of dread. It was the silence after the storm, the silence of a world that had been irrevocably changed. The lights, once flashing and vibrant, now seemed dim and lifeless, casting long, eerie shadows across the dance floor. The students, frozen in their positions, looked like mannequins. Their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. They were all staring at the door that Lucas and Rachel had disappeared through, as if waiting for them to reappear, as if waiting for the nightmare to continue. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. I felt like I was being judged, like I was being held responsible for what had just happened. I wanted to scream, to shout, to explain that I had nothing to do with it, that I was just as shocked and terrified as everyone else. But I couldn't. My voice was gone, my body locked in a state of paralyzing fear. Slowly, the students began to move, their bodies stiff and awkward, as if they were trying to remember how to walk again. They moved like zombies, their eyes glazed over, their faces vacant and lifeless. They filed out of the gymnasium, leaving behind a space that felt empty and cold. I stood there alone, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there. I needed to go home. But I couldn't move. My body was still under their control. I couldn't even turn away from the door that Lucas and Rachel had disappeared through. Then, I saw it. A flicker of light in the darkness. It was coming from the direction of the cemetery, from the direction of Lucas's house. It was a pale, ethereal light, a light that was both beautiful and terrifying. It was calling me. I felt a tug, a pull, as if an unseen hand was reaching out to me, guiding me, leading me towards the light. I tried to resist, to pull back, but it was no use. My body was moving, my feet carrying me forward, my mind screaming at me to stop, to turn back, to run away. I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn back. I couldn't run. The light was pulling me in. The light, growing brighter with each step, seemed to draw me toward a place beyond the boundaries of our small town, a place that was both alluring and terrifying. I couldn't see what was beyond the light, but I knew, with an unsettling certainty, that it was something that would change me forever. The light pulled me forward, guiding me, leading me to a place that was both familiar and unknown. I knew, with a sickening clarity, that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. More_vert The light grew brighter as I approached, its ethereal glow illuminating the path before me. It seemed to beckon me forward, promising answers, offering a glimpse into a world beyond my understanding. I felt a sense of urgency, a sense that I was on a journey that could not be delayed. My feet moved faster, my body carrying me forward, guided by the unseen hand that pulled me towards the light. As I neared the source of the light, I saw the cemetery, its rows of headstones silhouetted against the darkness. The trees that bordered the cemetery seemed to stand as silent sentinels, their branches reaching out towards the sky, their leaves rustling in the wind. I was drawn towards a single grave, a grave that stood apart from the rest, a grave that seemed to radiate a strange energy. The headstone was tall and narrow, its surface etched with an inscription that I could not read. The light emanated from beneath the headstone, a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself. It was as if the earth itself was breathing, releasing a power that was both ancient and terrifying. I reached out to touch the headstone, my fingers brushing against the cold, smooth stone. The inscription, which I could not read before, suddenly became clear. It was written in a language that I did not recognize, but it felt strangely familiar, as if I had known it always. The headstone read, "Here lies Esther Murphy, a daughter of the night, a mother to all shadows, the words echoed in my mind, a chilling revelation. I understood now. Lucas's grandmother, Esther Murphy, was a witch. And the light, the power that drew me here, was hers. A cold wind swept through the cemetery, chilling me to the bone. I felt a presence, a powerful, otherworldly presence that was watching me, judging me. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I was not alone. The light pulsed again, its glow intensifying, beckoning me forward. I felt a pull, a force that was drawing me towards the earth, towards the grave itself. I tried to resist, to pull back, but I couldn't. I was being drawn in. I felt a rush of energy, a tingling sensation that spread through my body, as if I was being filled with a power that was both alien and intoxicating. I felt a change within me, a change that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift, and I found myself falling into the darkness, falling into the heart of the grave itself. The world around me faded, and I was consumed by the light, the darkness, the power that awaited me. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow, a whirlwind of emotions and sensations that I couldn't comprehend. It was like being plunged into a dream that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The ground beneath me seemed to vanish, replaced by a swirling abyss of energy that pulled me deeper and deeper into its embrace. I felt myself changing, transforming, becoming something more, something less. The boundaries of my own being blurred, my thoughts and feelings blending into a chaotic symphony of sensations. I was no longer Max, the painter, the friend, the son. I was something else, something new, something that I didn't recognize. The light grew brighter, a blinding white that seemed to consume everything around me. I closed my eyes, unable to bear its intensity, and I felt a rush of power surge through me. It was a power that was both ancient and primal, a power that resonated with the very essence of the earth. The darkness, too, became more tangible, a dense, suffocating presence that seemed to permeate every fiber of my being. It was a darkness that held both fear and fascination, a darkness that whispered secrets, promising power, revealing truths that I had always known but had never dared to acknowledge. Then, the light and darkness merged, a symphony of opposites that coalesced into a single, vibrant entity. I felt the presence of Esther Murphy, her essence as potent as ever, her power flowing through me, filling me, changing me. She was a mother to all shadows, and I was now her child. My body, once familiar, became a vessel, a shell for the power that coursed through me. I felt the ancient magic flowing through my veins, pulsing with a life that was both alluring and terrifying. The darkness became a part of me, a darkness that no longer frightened me, but that I embraced. It was the darkness that allowed me to see the truth, the darkness that revealed the secrets that had been hidden for so long. The darkness that allowed me to understand the true nature of the world. And then, I saw him. Lucas. He stood before me, his eyes shining with an otherworldly glow. His beard, long and wild, framed a face that seemed to radiate an unsettling beauty. He was no longer the strange boy who had haunted our halls. He was something more, something powerful, something terrifying. He smiled, a slow, chilling smile that revealed a sharp glint in his eyes. "Welcome home, Max," he said, his voice a low, guttural whisper. "Welcome to our world." I looked at him, and I saw myself reflected in his eyes. I saw the darkness within me, the power that coursed through my veins, the truth that I had always known but had never dared to embrace. And I knew, with an unsettling certainty, that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. The world, as I knew it, had vanished. I was no longer Max, the painter. I was something else. Something new. Something dangerous. I was a child of the night. The end.